Yeah. For the whole since October. Yeah. Sorry. I'm in texture. Yeah, there's anything. Yeah. On the line. You just sit on one chair. Oh, yeah. You can have a seat right. Yeah, right there. Yeah, you want to pass your one? Yeah. How you doing? Oh, you want to pass that down? Pass that down? Yeah. I gotta do everything now. Sorry. Is this one set? Yeah. You need this one? Yeah, the law is needed, yes. How many copies do you have?
One for everybody here. He has one, he has one. He has.
You have extra copies?
Yes.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that.
Not a minute.
Yeah.
What is, what can we share?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yep, yeah, of course we do. Never mind.
Are we ready? Good evening, everyone. I would like to call the Finance Committee to order once again. And we will continue our budget discussion. This evening, we are going to cut some questions that are waiting us some outstanding answers. I think we do have some of them, and then we have invited our auditing forum to be here. Thank you for being here this evening and to answer some of the questions. So what I'll do for the sake of time, I'll just hold back on the questions then and just go right to the auditor and ask for a question so that it doesn't need to sit through.
Oh, the other questions for the finance department, you mean?
Yes, the other finance question, we'll deal with that after we conclude with the auditor.
Sure.
Ms. Porterfield, we'll start with you. You had some questions. Would you like to go through that and then we can talk general stuff?
Well, first of all, thanks for being here tonight.
Yeah, cool.
So did you get any questions?
I did, yeah. So Marion, I wasn't sure if you wanted to start with one of the questions, we can kind of go through all of
Yes.
them, or how,
Go through,
if you want to just ask me the question, we can kind of open up a general discussion,
Sure.
if that works for you.
That works for me just fine. So first of all, I asked you just kind of overall, explain what happens during audits.
Sure. So our typical goal during an audit is to be able to issue an opinion on your financial statements, whether they're in compliance with generally accepted accounting principles, that's otherwise known as GAAP. So what we're essentially doing, like for the short version of this, is we're doing a number of different procedures to verify and come to an opinion as to whether these balances are accurately stated, materially stated, in compliance with GAAP. And we do a lot of different procedures to verify that information. So the information that's presented to us, we're trying to verify if we agree with that information. So right now what we're doing is we're on site doing our preliminary testing. So what we're doing during that time is we're reviewing your process memos, we're reviewing your internal controls, and what we're doing is we're also testing those internal controls. So we're doing a lot of different procedures to verify, one, if we feel that there's any major gaps in your processes, if there's any overlap of duties, any lack of segregation of duties, things that are kind of red flag items. Over all the years that we've audited the city, feel that you have very good internal controls, you have very good people here, very skilled people. Processes don't really change that much. Processes are pretty much the same. People are pretty much the same. And as we go through that testing, what we're doing is we're selecting samples based on the representative size of that particular area. So whether it's cash disbursements, receipts, payroll, credit cards, what we're doing is we're selecting samples that we feel are appropriate for the audit. So like for cash disbursements, we'll select a sample of 40 items, systematically test those. We request supporting documentation for those. And what we're doing is we're going through the process memo to see if, one, your staff is following the procedures that are in place. And if they're not, why? Like, what's the reason for it? Is there supposed to be a dual signature on a check? Is there supposed to be an invoice approval? Is there's a whole process of approving that disbursement or receipt or payroll item or credit card? And that's what we're doing right now. So that we're in the preliminary planning phase of our audit. And what we do is we're doing this pretty much to gather information that we can use for the actual verification of the balances. So we're going through the internal controls and we're saying, do we feel that the controls are properly designed? Is there any major, holes in there or gaps in the system? And also, we're using that information to say, are they following the processes that they've designed? And we've always found during the audits that your staff does a really great job. They're really organized. They have, they have a good understanding of the internal controls and the processes, and they're able to process these transactions in a timely manner and accurately. There will be things from time to time, small little things. Maybe they missed the signature or something happened. I mean, during COVID there was not here, but prolific amongst our clients that, sometimes they had to go around and circumvent the controls. But here they were always able to process the transactions in a timely manner and an accurate manner. So we use that information to plan our further procedures. Do we feel there's any risky areas of the audit that we need to focus on? Let's say your controls were a complete mess. We would have to up our substantive testing to account for that. So we'd have to do more testing of the account balances, tighter testing of the account balances, and select more transactions. So when we come back in March, just to give you a little summary of what happened during the planning phase, we haven't found any, it's very typical from year to year. We found that the controls are in good order. You're following the process as you're documented. And overall, we didn't have any, risky areas that we feel are problem areas. So there's nothing to indicate to us that we need to elevate our level of substantive testing during the actual audit fieldwork. So when we come back in March, what we're going to do is we're going to test the actual balances. So your main accountant, Liz Nelson, she's great. I've worked with her for years. She is a very strong and knowledgeable accountant. She has a really great understanding of government accounting. And what she does is she prepares all of the actual work papers for us. So any of the items that we're requesting, whether it's bank reconciliations, whether it's support for payroll, support for accrued liabilities, accounts payable. And you also have a lot of different departments here who help us as well. So you have your payroll department, you have your accounts payable department as well. So we request items from them as well. So we're doing different procedures. So we have 4 main ways that we test during the audit. So what we're typically doing is we test either by precision, which is we're testing 100% of the balance. So items such as cash, debt, any of your bonds, we're testing those 100%. And we're testing those to outside sources as well. So what we'll do is we'll also confirm your bank account balances with the bank. So we either reach out to them via email, via paper confirmations, via electronic confirmations. We also confirm that the debt payments are being made. We can see those in the ledger. We might also do what's called sampling. So sampling is typically something that we do with an account balance that has a lot of smaller transactions. And what we do is there's no really large material items in there. So what we do is a sample that's representative of that total population. And what we'll do is we'll use specific forms that we have in our audit software. It'll produce maybe a sample of 25 items or 40 items. So we'll select 40 items from that account, test those items to verify that we agree with how you calculated the balances. If it's compensated absences is a big one because that has a lot of smaller balances in it with a lot of enumerated balances. Items that are, have larger balances, such as your accounts payable, we might test those, look at material items within those, which is also called scoping. So in scoping, what we're doing is we're looking at transactions that are in excess of our certain thresholds that we have. So every audit, we have the concept of materiality. So in your audit, a lot of people like to think of an audit as, we're looking at every transaction or we're looking at every single thing. We're really not doing that. What we're doing is we're looking for large material items that would change the judgment of a reasonable user of those financial statements. So when the financial statements go to any user, whether that be a bank, a bondholder, they would look at those financial statements. And if some of those numbers could be misstated, but as long as they're not materially misstated and they would sway the judgment of that user, they can reasonably rely on that. So there's this concept of materiality and also of what a reasonable person would do with that information. So, an unreasonable person might say, hey, your cash is off $1. I can't rely on that. Well, that's not what a reasonable person would do, So we have that concept of materiality as well in everything that we're doing. So we're looking at, in scoping, we're looking at items that are over a certain threshold. So like accounts payable, we might do that. We look at subsequent transactions as well. So we look at transactions that are after your year end to see if those are properly reported, because one of those riskier areas is going to be transactions that are near the year end, subsequent to the year end. So in early January, February, that might not have been processed correctly. So that might have been an invoice that should have been in 2024, but it was paid in 2025 and it was reported in 2025. We'll make a suggestion to move that back or propose a journal entry. So if we do notice during our audit, there's any items that need to be adjusted or any accounts that we feel need to be adjusted that are material, what we'll do is we would propose a journal entry. I would discuss it with Liz, Derek, and Eric, and we'd go through it and we'd say, hey, this is what I think you need to make the change for. And if it's not material, they can either pass on it, or if it is material, then I can tell them, this is a material entry. You cannot move forward, and I cannot give you an unmodified opinion on this fund unless you make this entry. Fortunately, we don't see a lot of that here at all. I mean, if any of the journal entries we've ever had are relatively very small, typically cleanup items, if we have them. Those are always going to be part of your post-governance letter as well. So that communication at the end of the audit, if we had any entries that were passed or actually booked, that would be part of that report as well. So we're required at the end of the audit to disclose that information to you as well. So that's kind of like the quick oversight of the audit. I mean, just kind of going through, and really ultimately what we're trying to do is verify the information that you're providing in your financial statements.
So you mentioned about item that when you do sample, those are item that is posted, cost that is posted already.
Yeah, so like, let's take, for example, compensated assets is always an account that we typically will sample because there's a lot of smaller balances that might not be material. So when I say material, we have an actual prescribed form that we use to calculate your materiality per fund. So it is important to note that when we issue your financial statements, we're not doing them under GASB Statement 34. It's the Government Accounting Standards Board statement. And it required, this was back in 2001, required that you have a comprehensive set of financial statements that ultimately have two sets of financial statements in them. You would have the government-wide statements, and you also have your fund-level financial statements. So the government-wide would be all of your activities, whether it's current or long-term, and then the fund level is going to be modified accrual. So it's only current items. It's only items expected to be received or settled within the next operating cycle. We have always historically chose to do your financial statements on the fund level only because we do not have an accurate record of your fixed assets. So all of the buildings that the city owns, all of the infrastructure that the city owns, to go through and try to figure out that amount would you would have to hire a consultant to do that. Ultimately go back into that number. And it's something that I think years ago when we had discussed it, it was something that was just not cost feasible because you can still have the same objective without that cost outlay to have the additional cost to do that every year to keep up on that and depreciate those assets as well. So
I'm glad you touched on fixed assets. I know a couple of years ago we did talk about it here.
Yeah.
And I think maybe your firm or you with your partner made a recommendation that we should do it at some point in time. But then the cost was one of the factors. But I think based on those discussion back in time a couple of years ago, it is something that we should do. So we need to look at the cost, hire a consultant. And I think that is an important part of audit, the component of the audit process to see where we are in terms of fixed asset throughout the city.
Sure.
So
I mean, I would think that,
since we are continue to hire you on the forum, I think that's something, a recommendation you should keep in the forefront.
Yeah.
To continue to recommend that, because it's important that we know how much asset we have throughout the city.
Right. And you would have a rough idea with your insurance values. So your insurance carrier is going to have a value placed on those, an insurable value, which is not going to match your historical cost. So for GAAP, you have to do it at historical cost and then depreciate those over the useful life of that asset. So if it's a piece of equipment, computer equipment's probably 5 years, you depreciate over that straight line. But ultimately, it's really managing that. I mean, the city has a substantial amount of assets, and you might not exactly know where all of them are. Inventorying those, I think it was just really a cost prohibitive thing that you didn't want to do years ago, but it's certainly something that you could do, and certainly something that we could do to modify the financial statements to make those GASB 34 compliant. They're not required to be right now, so you can still satisfy your audit requirement on the fund level. And personally, I've always thought that the fund level financial statements are more accurate and reasonable because that's truly what's going on at any given point in time. Your government-wide financial statements, they're going to include your liabilities for your GASB 68 pension, so the underfunding of the ERS and TRS, or if it swings to an asset position, you might have to record those as assets. They're really not assets of the city. They're items that have to be recorded based on GAAP, but you have no asset with ERS or TRS, and you have no liability with that. Ultimately, that's only if those systems were to fail. That's your prospective allocation of that shortfall or asset. Same with your OPEB liability. You have a $300 million plus liability for your other post-employment benefits under GASB Statement 75. That ultimately is a paper liability on your financial statements. It's something that we have to report on, but it's not something that you are ever going to have to fund, or you can't fund either. So it's this huge liability that's on there. You'd have a massive deficit position on the government-wide statements, and it's really not reflective of the activities of the city.
Can your form do a fixed asset audit?
We would not be qualified to do that, or have we ever really done that? I mean, we could audit that. We could definitely audit it if the information was provided to us. But that would be a substantial undertaking as well, because really we'd have to go through and verify what an outside company, the information that they would give us. So they would go through the entire city, inventory everything. I think what they would typically do, I've had a couple other clients do this years ago, they will inventory tag everything. So they have a system where it's like a wand tag, and it has a serial number on it, a barcode. It will say location, police department, this equipment, that equipment, location, clerk's office, this equipment. And you'd have all different areas that you would have assets at. And then each year, because right now what you're doing in your fund level financial statements is you are expensing. So under government accounting, you have to expense those at the fund level. But a GASB 34 adjustment would be that we take those off of the fund level and we capitalize them onto your government-wide statements. So that's something that's an adjustment that we have to make from your fund level now to the full GASB 34.
Have you, I would say your form,
Yeah.
have you or your firm ever did any sample on open payables and open accounts receivable?
We do that. That's part of our audit. Part of our audit is we take, as a firm approach, we typically take a very balance sheet intensive approach. So we are looking at, where's one, the most material account balances, and then two, where's going to be the most risk. Cash is your riskiest asset. I mean, that's one of the assets that has to be the most safeguarded. Receivables and payables are also part of that as well, because receivables have a substantial risk as well. Are they being reported properly? Are they being reported accurately? And what we do is cut off procedures. So any of the items that are received subsequent to year end and they're material, what we're doing is we're looking at those transactions to see if they're reported in the proper period. So what we'll be doing in March is we'll be looking at transactions in January, February, and March of 2026 from 1/1/26 up to the date that we're actually sitting here, looking at those transactions which meet our materiality thresholds. And we're going to say, okay, we're going to select the supporting documentation for them, and has your staff recorded them in the proper period. So if they don't, then that's where we could propose an adjusting entry to say, hey, I would go to Derek and say, hey, Derek, this is a material item. Why is it recorded in this period? And people, that was an error. We just missed it. Sometimes that happens, but I don't see that a lot here at all. I mean, there are the records, because we've had such a relationship with the members of finance and accounting here. They know what we're looking for. They make it part of their process to go through the subsequent receipts before we even get here. So part of their process is I have to look at these subsequent receipts to make sure that they're properly recorded. So when they pass accounts payable desk, they look at those items and say, okay, is this in the proper period? Is it for December of 25? I've paid it here, it should be an AP. So we're also looking at accounts payable and receivables as well, in terms of what you have reported and also what you might not have reported. So we're doing tests for those as well.
What about accruals? Have you ever done a sample on that? To see if that's in or out?
Yep, that's something that we do every single audit that we do. We look at payroll accruals, we look at accrued liabilities. And Liz has always been great in getting information to us. So she's very proactive. So she'll contact me ahead of time. She'll say, hey, I got this coming up, or here's a new accounting pronouncement that's coming up, a new GASB standard. So the big ones the past few years, GASB Statement 87 that dealt with leases, GASB 100 that dealt with compensated absences. She gets ahead of those and she says, this is what I think. I don't think it's going to impact us. I think we're already ready for this. We don't have any of this. It doesn't apply to us. I go through and I look at her support and I verify whether I agree with that or not. So if it's something that we need to make a change for, we can get ahead of that. We're not doing that in March when I'm sitting here, because that's really the least ideal situation, is to be at the audit table and dealing with a major accounting issue. You don't want to be implementing a pronouncement during the audit or after your audit year is ended. So
have you ever encountered a project invoice and accruals?
What do you mean by
project invoice, AI invoice that would not stop it on time, but we had to accrue for it?
Sometimes I guess, if you have an invoice for it, so if you have the invoice for it already, that would typically be an accounts payable. An accrued expense would be an item that you know is there, you know is a liability to you, but you haven't been invoiced for it yet. So it's really an item that you know is there that needs to be booked in the proper period, but you have not received it. So sometimes contractors just don't send you invoices, but you know you owe them money. So legally we owe them this money, but they just don't send us the information. During COVID, that was prolific. It was really happening a lot.
So have you ever encountered any issue with approvals like that?
Here?
Yes.
I think anything that we typically go through. So if I had an issue with that, you would see that as a proposed adjusting entry. So that would be something that I would make a recommendation to the accounting staff to say, we need to book an entry for this, And then as part of it, we have discussions over, hey, do you have any projects going? Do I need to know about anything? So part of our audit procedures are also determining whether, we look at your lawsuits, we contact your attorneys to see if there's anything outstanding that we need to book. So if there's a potential for a major lawsuit that's going to be in excess of your insurance coverage, we have to book a liability. So we think there's a substantial liability for the city that they might have to cover this shortfall. And that's something that we have to book or consider booking within the financial statements.
What about accounts that you have costs in one account? You have to book it in one account. A mistake happened, you book it in another account, and then you have to do a reconciliation to draw down from that account. Have you ever encountered that during your time here with us?
To draw down from
that account? For example, let me just use specific CDBG. We had an issue with CDBG a couple weeks ago, where the money is supposed to be drawn out in CDBG account.
Okay.
And it was drawn out from the general fund. And then with our discussion here, then the reconciliation happened where the money was actually drawn down from CDBG and then replenished back to the general fund.
I have not seen anything.
The cost code was not used properly in terms of the allocation.
Which I have not seen anything like that so far. So part of a secondary part of our audit is also what's called the federal single audit. I know you've heard me talk about that during the council meetings and everything, but since the city expends more than $750,000, and then this year now it's over $1 million. Once you spend over $1 million, which we clearly know that the city does, you have to have what's called a single audit. So a federal single audit where we go through and actually have to rotationally test your larger grants that are considered the major programs. So we have two types of programs. Type A programs, Type B programs. Type A programs are going to be your high dollar ones that are in excess of that threshold. So once you hit over $1 million, you have to have a single audit. Any of those grants that are in excess of $1 million are considered Type A programs. If we haven't tested that program on a 3-year rotational basis, that program now gets cycled in and becomes a Type A major program, or if we had any findings in previous years. So, for example, the last time I looked at the Community Development Block Grant, and in that umbrella, there's also certain, it's called CFDA numbers. So those programs are identified by these numbers. So like your Community Development Block Grant is going to be 14.218. So that grant, I looked at that last in the 2022 fiscal year. It's now coming due in 2025. So that grant, because I did not have any material findings, significant deficiencies within that is now going to be coming due for me to audit that in 2025. So that will be a grant that I can tell you now I will be selecting. And also I will be reviewing the ARPA funds as well because those are so big. So
it was one of the reasons why I asked that question. I'm glad that you are going to select that for an audit.
Yeah,
I hope that you do a more, not a sample, but a more comprehensive.
Well, we don't only do samples. So as part of the single audit, we're required to follow specific federal guidelines. So we have what's called the federal compliance supplement. I've printed out a copy of it here as well. So there's suggested audit procedures in there, and there's different procedures that we do to actually test not only the validity of the information that's in there number-wise, but also your compliance with the program. So we're working with development, we go through, we look at the invoices, we do a lot of different testing within there versus just pulling a sample. So you also have to consider as well, that has a materiality concept on it as well. So I'm not looking at, just because I'm auditing the block grant doesn't mean I'm looking at an expenditure for even $30,000. Materiality is so high on that, I'm probably up in the $100,000 range, somewhere around there, just as an example, because that grant is so big. So could there be a situation like that? I mean, it's very possible. I mean, you're processing a lot of transactions. There could be human error in there. I have not experienced it so far in what I've been doing, but I would certainly, bring that up with development and say, hey, what's going on and why did this happen? And
have you ever done a review or an audit on open POs? Some of them that is aged within, amount of, I would say, X amount of time that will raise a red flag in terms of you have an open PO, it aged 120 days. Would you consider that something as a discussion point with the team?
Yeah, so as part of our audit as well, what we're doing is we're looking, so we call them encumbrances. So those open POs that have money set aside, what we're typically doing is we're looking to make sure that either one, there's a signed contract in place for that item to be able to appropriate those funds, or quote, something to support that. So a PO is not acceptable for us. We can't just have a blanket PO saying, oh, we're going to buy 10 trucks next year. We have to have something, a quote, some sort of supporting documentation to be able to support that encumbrance, that fund balance that's set aside for this specific purpose, that whatever it is that you're doing. So some of those older items, those are items that if they're material, we would have looked at them in a previous audit. And as long as they're still open, we really don't have a finding related to that, because it could be something, there are items that we would discuss, but if it's still open and nobody's cleared it out, it could be something that's a multi-year thing. You got the quote because you had to get it at that time, but it's a project that's not going to start for several years. There's a lot of different factors that could lead to that being open for such a period of time. So it's not unusual for municipalities to audit.
To have open POs, age open.
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes those are projects that are continuous over years.
But if you were to encounter something like that, there is no contract, the PO is open with value, and it's aged X amount of days, what would be your recommendations to the team?
To remove it, to do a journal entry to get it out of encumbrances and back into regular fund balance.
Perfect, thank you. That's enough for me now.
I can talk about accounting forever if you want to. You got
that's my field.
That's my field.
Yeah.
So my other next question was,
Sure.
like during last year's audit, there was a finding, and I have it here on page 4 for our capital funds that had a deficit. And in here it says that it would be eliminated by the permanent financing of project falls through the issuance of serial bonds. So is that a standard practice? Like we're ending the year in deficit, we're going to be that deficit changed by the serial bonds?
No, so just in what you're referring to, that wasn't actually an audit finding. That was just part of the financial statements we were saying. So what we have to do is identify if there's any deficit fund balance situation. So it's not a formal audit finding. It's just something that we have to highlight in the notes of the financial statements. But that is something so what you're going to do is you're going to use the serial bonds in the future to fund that project.
Right.
So ultimately we're expending the money down now, whether it's either borrowing from the general fund or however you're financing those expenditures for now, and then ultimately bonding those out to fund those projects going forward. So once with the serial bonds, the proceeds from the bonds hit the capital projects fund, it's going to eliminate that deficit and offset it. So you'll see that swing from year to year, whether it's the timing of the projects as well and when those expenditures hit. So it's not something that you could just say, oh, we're going to get rid of it, bonds. Mm-hmm. It's for those specific projects. You'd have to bond out.
Projects that have already been identified then.
Correct.
Right. So also in there under the special, let me see. special fund grant, I think it was. The grant is under the general fund. In 2024, you said, so it says that our fund balance was unchanged as ARPA lost revenue, about 4.5 million was claimed to recover the initial deficit. So that was happened in 2024, but we can't, so where are we, I don't know how much of this you looked at, where are we now with that, because the ARPA money is essentially gone.
So that's actually a really good question, because it was something that, any reader of the financial statements would look down and they would say, okay, well, in 2023, you had net zero in the general fund. 2024 is the same thing. As part of that ARPA money, there is this loss revenue calculation that's inherent within that grant. So what you could do with that is, Liz has a very detailed spreadsheet. She went through all of the ARPA documentation, the Treasury regulations. She set up this spreadsheet to show exactly how that calculation is done. So if you did not have a certain growth factor from your base year, and you didn't have, I think it was like 5.2%, I don't know exactly, but with that 5.2%, it's expecting that the city should have grown 5.2%. If your city didn't grow by that 5.2% per year, any of that shortfall, and there is a calculation that goes in it, so it's not just a one number. So there's a lot of different numbers that go into it. But based on that calculation, if you didn't have that growth factor, you can use that to offset your losses. So your city didn't grow because of the impact of COVID, and you can use some of that ARPA revenue to offset that. But you cannot create a surplus in the general fund. So that's why it would go, she released enough ARPA revenue just to get you exactly to zero, because she can't go $1 over. She can't use that loss revenue to exceed a break-even point. So that's why those 2 years were break-even overall. And that's also a calculation she's going to have to do for this year as well. But as you said, that money's pretty much gone, because the vast majority of it is in the miscellaneous revenue fund. So for those earmarked projects. So I think there was a total at the end of 2024, not positive the exact numbers when you have the financials, but I think it was about $4 million that's in the general fund and deferred. And we had about $9 million in special miscellaneous revenue funds. So, but that has to be used specifically for those projects. So as you know, at the end of 2024, all of that money had to be obligated, and then it has to be expended by the end of 2026. So that will have to be within the next, you really have a year to make sure that money's expended.
Those are my questions.
I have one more question.
Sure.
Over the last 2 years, we have been exceeding our tax collection, and also the lien collection. Is that something that brings something that you have identified as a good point that you should mention in the audit, or something that?
Now I'm not sure what you mean by exceeding the tax collection. Could you elaborate?
Our projected numbers.
Okay.
Our estimate, we exceed that by X amount.
Okay.
And also outstanding lien collection. Is that something that you have looked at over the past 2 years?
Looked at specifically, no. I mean, that's typically something that we do have a section in the financial statements in the very beginning. It's called the management's discussion and analysis. So that's a required part. So as we mentioned, GASB 34 before, your statements are GASB 34 compliant, except for that government-wide financial statement because of the fixed asset. So you do have an MD&A, you have all the required supplementary information, you have everything but the fixed asset section. So the MD&A that we have is your section, that's management's discussion analysis, where you can put pretty much any information you want. You want to highlight positives of the city, you can add that information in there. And we don't audit that section, but we do review the information for general reasonableness. We do have some procedures that we do over the information. So if there's something in there that looks materially incorrect to me, if you just threw in, really positive stuff that doesn't make any sense, I would have to question that. But, the information that I'm getting from Liz is all off the budget spreadsheets and things that she prepares. So I think that's actually in the management's discussion and analysis. So she does have sections that highlight in the beginning, tax lien collections exceeded budget by X amount of dollars, or we had a shortfall, like the home sales was always something that fell short of budget. So we projected home sales to be X amount of dollars. We just didn't realize that during the year. So there's that section there where you can elaborate as much as you want. You can add the information in there. So anything that you feel is useful to the readers and the users of your financial statements, we could absolutely add it.
Last year in the audit, our sales tax we exceed our collection by $1.8 million. Is that something that might have concern for an audit?
No, I mean, not at all.
Not in terms of good for us, but something that you could say, well, we didn't project or estimate correctly?
I mean, I think it's,
1.8 million versus that is a high number.
I think it's very difficult to project that because of what's been happening. So I mean, everything that you see out in the public is saying, sales are down, or sales are, you get conflicting information. So to be able to project what's going to happen in your county and in the state and how much sales are going to go through the sales went through the roof. If there's new home sales, now they're saying the home sales are pulling back. It's really hard, I think, to estimate that. But I think if maybe, you have some of these years that are always going to be anomaly years. So that's probably a year that's an anomaly that was a real spike. And then you have years that are down under what we, I don't think personally that you would want to budget too high on that, because if you do, then, and it's short, then you're not prepared for that. So to have that kind of surprise is more, it's better to be more conservative than not.
But it's a $1.8 million surprise. So that's
better than
a big number. It's not
Sure.
It's not 8,000.
Sure.
So that should have been like a point of discussion as to why 1.8. Yes, we know that there is up and down in the market, but to budget at 7 million and then you're coming at 8.8 million.
Well,
it should be something of something should be addressed in a sense of a matter of concern.
I think we're really, from a standpoint, you do have to understand as well that we're not involved in the daily operations of the city. I'm really here at the very end to say what I think, if I agree with the numbers or not. So really the daily and day-to-day operations, the budget preparation, we're really looking at it for reasonableness, and I'm really more focused on budget shortfalls. So if there was an excessive budget shortfall, what was the reason for that? And really, if you're not budgeting the revenue correctly, that's really more of an internal thing that I'm not overly concerned with. But if you have a line item for your expenditures and it's way under budget, that's more of an issue with a liability or a shortfall or not being able to meet your obligations going forward. That's a concern to the reader versus, hey, we got more revenue than we think we should be on. So it's really kind of, that's the way we typically approach that, is more looking to see, our audit has a general premise that, are you overstating assets and understating liabilities? Because if I'm more concerned in that situation than if you're overstating your liabilities and understating your assets. I don't want you to do either, but I'm more concerned if you're understating your liabilities.
That's what I was trying to get at. Yeah.
Right.
Sorry.
Yes, thank you. I have not been more confident that I was not an auditor than hearing you talk.
I'd like to share my information with everybody. We don't get to talk about it much. It's just,
I've been keeping notes, and in the spirit of being the chairman, thank you very much.
Yeah.
You did mention 4 methods for how you conduct the audit. I only captured 3.
Yeah, and I did.
Everyone is spoken. What was the?
So you could be an auditor because you could.
Yeah,
So the last one, and we do use all that. Those are our four main methods, but our last one would be analytical procedures. So what we're doing is we're looking for variances from year to year, material variances in your account balances. So let's say payroll went up more than our materiality threshold. So typically we'll have a materiality threshold and also a percentage threshold as well. So whatever that percentage threshold is plus the materiality, if it's going up above that or below that, so if it's going up or down, we're going to question Liz, we're going to question Derek, Eric, we're going to say, hey, why did this account change so much? Sales tax would be one of those accounts. It just came in higher than we really ultimately expected. We did not think that we were going to get that much money, and we didn't, they didn't budget for that much money. So that was really why it came in higher than they expected. So analytical procedures we'll typically do on accounts that maybe are not material. But what we do is there is a balance sheet account on that. So what we're doing is we're looking to see, did this change materially from prior year, or was it just was it roughly the same balance as last year? So if it's a smaller immaterial balance and it's about the same it was last year, didn't change materially, I'm not going to go in and test that account. So that's kind of a strategy that we use as well.
Thank you. And then I think as the conversation has naturally been going along, is it safe to assume that after our budget process concludes, that is taken into consideration in your review of the financial picture of the city?
The budget process itself?
The numbers that we essentially vote or adopt.
It will be part of what we do in our audit as well is this will be more of like during the audit test work time is we're going to be looking at the adopted budget. This is your budget for 26. So back into 25, I'm looking at the budget you've adopted for 25, and we're looking to see if there's any, they have budget actual schedules. We're looking to see if there's any material variances. And as I spoke to John before, it's really, we're looking at more of the expenditures. So we're looking to see, like, are you way under budgeting your expenditures? Is there a problem with that? Is there, that's what we're looking at from the audit standpoint. But the actual budget process itself and kind of, what you're going through right now is not really something of a over audit concern unless there's going to be significant issues with it, being able to find the funds ultimately. If that's part of the audit, then that's something we'll have to disclose in the audit to say, there is this projected shortfall, projected hole in the budget that needs to be completed.
Perfect, thank you. And my question is centered around the CDBG findings that we had, and thank you for the clarification that this will be included in your current review. So I think my next question, I'll just read it verbatim. It's given the status of our general fund balance, what I mean by that is just depleted.
Yeah, right.
We had two major contracts that are coming up for negotiation. In your just experience with other municipalities, is it uncommon for the council to establish parameters or limitations to kind of ensure that those discussions don't balloon out into exorbitant like financial expenses for the city? What I mean by that is we had recent contract discussions that for wrong, right, or indifferent projections kind of far exceeded what we anticipated. Is that
right?
Safe to say, Mr. Mudavarian, with respect to the police, and I forgot the other contract, but wanting to ensure that that does not happen or repeat itself again. Just your.
I think that's something that your accounting and finance staff are continually doing. They're continually looking at that fund balance situation. So if there's one magical number, I would say no. But ultimately, they're looking at their expenditures, but the budget process is part of that. How much of the fund balance can we realistically and reasonably use? But that's really the process you're in right now, is saying, okay, we're going to have to dip into the fund balance, or we're going to have to make other adjustments to the budget somehow to balance this. But how much of that can we use? We know we need X amount of dollars per week to operate the city. You can't, there's really no magical solution to that ultimately. You have to keep enough fund balance to be comfortable and to have that cushion. But ultimately there's really no one answer to that. The budget is that process. It's figuring out what's going to be our shortfall, what's going to be, our excess funds that we have available. So to keep a certain amount aside, I think the council could make a policy to say, okay, we want to keep X amount of dollars or X amount percentage in fund balance. But ultimately with the contracts, I think you're kind of, your hands are tied by that because they're contracts, they're union contracts that you're going to have to negotiate and abide by, and those costs are fixed, and there's nothing you can really do about those in the end, because if they negotiate those contracts the way they are, those costs come due and you have to pay them. So.
Thank you. And that was the last question, kind of had to deal with the reconciliation process that's going on right now. Have you had the opportunity to review what is currently underway? And then my question was honestly centered around, have you been able to ascertain any recommendations moving forward? Yeah.
So as part of your budget process, it's really kind of outside of the scope of our audit. So it wouldn't be something that we could be or really would be involved in. So we're really limited by our audit as to what we can do to realistically help you out. We can't do anything, any of the day-to-day operational type stuff or any sort of management responsibilities. We're strictly confined to our audit parameters and our regulations. So it really confined within the audit. So that part of the budget process is really outside of our scope. It's not something that we would ever be involved in with the municipality at all. But in terms of recommendations, I think it's really, the thing that I could recommend to you is really just dealing with all your different departments. Talk to your finance people, talk to your accounting people. Liz Nelson is a great store of wealth. She has a lot of knowledge with government accounting, the finances of the city. She knows your accounts in and out. So where she can find additional funds, where she could find recommendations, things like that, or anything that's going on. Not so much additional funds, but just any recommendations she has. I think you're starting. She's a good person to talk to. Talk to the people that you have in place. They're very knowledgeable people and smart people, and they can help you out with this, I think.
Again, thank you for your time.
Yeah.
I do have, so this relates to, you sent us a pre-governance letter.
That'll be the post-governance letter, I think, or well, it could be the pre. If that's the one for 25 audit, it's pre. Yep.
So there was just a couple things on the second page, and I know this is like standard in every letter. So almost to the end of the letter, we said that we have identified the following significant risks of material misstatement as part of the budget plan.
Right.
And then it talks about the management override internal controls and improper revenue recognition due to fraud. So could you explain why that is like a standard thing Is that?
Sure, those, yeah, so, and it's a good question as well, because it catches a lot of our clients' attention, because they look at this and they say, well, what is this? Why is this in my letter all of a sudden? I said, that was a change a couple of years ago, where we now have to, in the pre-governance communication, we have to identify any significant risks that we have during the audit. So if there was a client that's overly risky or has a lot of things going on that we need to tell governance about, that's where we would list any of the additional risks that we have. So those are going to be two standard ones that are part of that letter. They're required to be in there no matter what. So those are going to be inherent to any organization, any municipality. So the risk of fraud and the risk of management overriding your internal controls. So that's inherent in any organization, because management could, in theory, always override the controls and say, these are our controls in place, but on management, you do something different. And that's a risk that our audit really can't mitigate against, and we can't really find unless it's brought to our attention. So.
So you did mention that you're going to be auditing these two projects, CDBG.
ARPA funds, yeah, correct.
Have you ever done any review of the ARPA fund, or this is the first time?
Nope, well, we've reviewed it every year since you received funds. It's since you started expanding it to the point where it was material enough to review. So when those funds initially came out, they were identified by the federal government as higher risk. So we weren't required to audit them, but they were considered higher risk. So basically they said you have to audit them. So they kind of made us audit those, and it would be something that I would select anyway. So we do, because you're considered a low risk auditee, because we haven't had significant findings in the past 3 years, we have to select 20% of your federal expenditures. So whatever the balance is, and actually because the federal expenditures have gone so high, there's actually a different formula that I have to use. Because you're in excess of $25 million last year, that changes the formula that I have. So it was actually, the threshold was actually a lot higher than that. But the ARPA funds are something that we've tested every year since then. So, and we've had no findings on it. We feel that, your accounting staff did a great job, and everybody that was involved in it, all the paperwork that we were provided with, you have the proper account codes, the proper allocation of those. And Liz has very detailed information as to what you can use it on. Like I was telling Marion, with the loss revenue detailed calculation, any of the salary, the actual COVID related portion of that. So there was that COVID mitigation portion. And then there's also all of the other projects that you could do, all the different uses for it and things like that. So we've audited it every year since then and had no major find, no significant deficiencies, no material weaknesses either. So.
Have you ever encountered any difficulty getting documents?
From your staff? No, nothing significant to the point where, so that's kind of what I always like to tell clients. If I was sitting at the council meeting and I gave you the post-governance letter, that would not be the place that I would tell you if I had any problems. It would be, well in advance of that. And I would, Eric would be my first line of defense. If I had a problem with a different department, I would say, and in previous years when Tony was here, it'd be the same thing. Hey, Tony, it's taken a little while to get this. Press a button and all of a sudden the stuff arrives, and I'm not talking significantly later I'm having any problems, but people get tied up. They have their own work they got to do, and then I got to deal with the auditors too, and I'm bothering them. And those are things that we work through during the audit. And it's not what I would consider significant enough to report to you. I don't want to, I'm not going to bother you in your day-to-day interactions with the city and the council, because it's not something that I feel warrants your attention. But if it did, I would absolutely go to you with the final line of defense and say, hey, we got to do something. So. But I've always, and that's the relationship we've had with the city over all these years, that it's a good relationship and I get the information I need. And that's why we've been able to complete the audit in a timely manner all these years as well.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, questions.
No, John, I prefer these questions too, because if we can discuss things in advance, I think an open line of communication is what I've told Derek and Eric and Liz, like having that between the other departments and different people. Sometimes people always don't see eye to eye on things, but that open line of communication is very helpful to run your organization, because sometimes you don't know what those people need. They don't know what you need, but you can just tell them and say, this is what we need to do our job. And it helps. So it helps everybody.
That's a good point here. Have you ever interacted with department head outside of the finance team?
Sure.
Have you ever interacted with them?
Every audit. So if
of your audit reports?
Yep. So every year, typically that's going to be done with a single audit. So if I'm auditing like the block grant, I'll deal with development, or the lead grant, I will deal with the lead people development as well. If it's the ARPA is typically within here, DOT, I deal with Chris Wallen upstairs. forget the guy who was running lead last year, but I dealt with him as well. So they're all very helpful in gathering all the information. And I typically have an open interview with them. So I will talk to them about the program, see, has anything materially changed? Here's what I had the last time I audited this. And we had a meeting last year, or you were part of that meeting as well. So with the lead grant, because that was one that I had to test because of how big it was. I met with all of the individuals involved with that. I think it was Alex and Maurice and Eric was there as well. So we had an open discussion about, this is how we process transactions. This is what we do. So I have to gain an understanding of those programs. I need to know what's going on, what you're allowed to do. And then I go to my compliance supplement and I audit it based on, my procedures that I think are reasonable to audit that.
And that is a direct face-to-face interaction with the department.
Yep. And if I have any questions for them, I mean, typically, I don't have a lot of questions outside of that interview because a lot of the information is exactly what they told me. Here's the people that we use. Here's the vendors we use for the lead mitigation and the lead repairs and all the things that they do. Here's the different projects we have. And it's very, I don't want to say it's straightforward because there's still testing involved. There's still a complexity to it, but it's a lot easier when I know what's going on. The information is uniform. So it's not like I have to hunt and peck for the information. I have to search for it and have people pull it and it's not there. So it's provided for me. And that's the hardest part of my job is getting the information from people because I'm so reliant on a lot of individuals to give me the information. It's not like I can just show up and work in a corner and get the audit done. I need help from a lot of different people.
Are there any other questions? Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Appreciate
absolutely.
your time. Appreciate
If you have any other questions in the meantime, just, let me know. You have my email, my phone. We can kind of work through anything. So
Thank you. Have a good evening.
you too.
Nice job.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we will go into some of the questions that was asked, and we'll just go through the answer. And see where we are. If there's any outstanding,
Questions, which questions are you referring to, Mr. Chairman?
any question that was asked of the finance commissioner,
Oh,
the answer that was provided, we can go to that, see where we are. And then we'll go into broad discussion.
he doesn't have any, there was no second to provide it. So I do want to bring up the fact that, because as we went back and forth with this and we discussed it, the pilots and the amount of pilots, the money that's going to come. So, the total that initially was in the budget was 2.8 million. Then we got a memo saying that that was changed based on recalculation for last year.
Error of the mental point.
Right,
Their documentation, which they notified our tax supervisor, which in turn should be notified me.
right. But then they sent a follow-up memo saying they were going to make the city whole anyway. Is that correct? I got a copy today, yesterday. Because I called Mr. Gillen and then there was a follow-up memo. So I just wanted to be clear what the final number is. The email that I received said our final number is for the city, not the total tax, but for the city, it's 2.9. You gave us this.
Yeah, that's the email that every one of us
Yeah.
had.
That was from regular.
Yes. Well, but
And so do not.
I would hope so.
Yes.
Yeah, there you are. Yeah.
Yes.
So I want to make sure that that is being reflected.
So you have an
I
email.
have to verify this with Lindsay, as they say this is an estimate, so I have to verify with her and, assessment. And verify this is actually true. Cause I can't, I mean, if you receive an error from them, yeah, 100% confidence that that's a correct number.
Well, their numbers are based on the investment. So, I mean, they have pretty much a good knowledge of the amount of money that was negotiated against these pilots. So if they're quoting 2.952 million here, I would say that these numbers are based on the projects that is in the pipeline or current pilot. So if this number is not correct, then the projects, the allocation against this pilot is not correct.
Again, I'll have a conversation with our tax supervisor, in this better knowledge. And he provides that number to finance, input with the budget.
Ms. Porterfield, you have that email where it's saying that they're gonna make us whole on this 227,000.
Right, so there's, and I printed it, but anyway, I'll forward the email, because the printout copy and, something else in the background, but it does say that, so this email went to, it did not include the council essentially, but it came on Friday. And it said, that they wanted to reach out prior to the weekend to assure you that they're sorry for providing you incorrect information. And then they're working on it, because they know that it impacts our budget, and they wanted us to take the team to take a half-full approach, that they're going to fix it. And, have summarize the overall positive revenue picture. And within there, he does say that they're, or maybe during our conversation, they're going to, make the city whole, and then with that, and to cover that error. And also, let's see. It again states that it gives you an overall pilot, and then it tells you what the city pilot is, or sort of be for, 2026.
Yeah, we did touch on this at our last meeting where there is a delta of $140,000
Right.
plus or minus.
Mhm.
So I think we need to rely on this information because as long as I've been there, Metroplex has provided numbers for us, we take the numbers because they are in a better position to give us these numbers.
Mhm.
And we just need to make the necessary adjustment from 2.816 to 2.952. And we have to back out the negative 227 that are gonna make us whole. Can you share that email with us, please?
Mhm.
A copy?
Yeah, I will, I had to bring a copy, make copies, so the second page of the copy came out with some other, something else in the background, so it's not really that legible. So I'll make sure you get that.
No, these numbers, they might look small among 227 plus 140, that's the 1% tax rate.
It's not small.
It's not, it might look in paper small numbers, but it's 1% tax that we're talking here. All right. I thought there were some questions. We want to talk about this report. Yeah, this kind of walk us through what's going on here. I see there's some deficit. How do you recover those? Can you just walk us through stuff, give us a high level summary and then we can.
Yeah, of course, so you can see, your assets, your liabilities, revenues, expenditures, it goes by, one of the examples I gave you the other day to the council, the police, best. As you can see in the, fourth, fifth column in, 7-1. If you look at the bottom, you see under over expended, the last row within this report, you'll see that's the available balances for each grant. If there are any questions regarding that, please let me know if there's any concerns. Like I sent this report to you yesterday, Mr. Porterfield. But any questions or concerns regarding this documentation? Yes.
How do you deal with the deficit against these grants?
What deficit are you looking at?
This says a surplus or deficit.
So you're looking, so the last line is what we have left, availability.
So look at the last line, another one with the surplus deficit / deficit.
Correct, because that's cash going out and then cash coming in. So we have to spend money first, then we get reimbursed. And we do the paperwork, whatever grant it is, like Data's need, there's a whole process for a reimbursement package. We have to fill out, send the appropriate documentation for invoices, purchase orders, other documentation that they expect of the city to provide. And then they'll provide funding, whether it's a wire or grant, wire check back into the city.
Are any of these grants have a timeline in them?
I would have to look in particular. Some of these are ongoing grants. For example, go back to the police bulletproof vest. I believe it's every year, police department, reapplies for that grant, so that's a continuation. As you can see, moving down the line, we'll see some of them, there's 22, there's 23 Jag. There's the CDBG, not CDBG, excuse me, the lead. Yeah, the lead grant ML2, you see the 5.6 million there. And you can see, where's that, excuse me, that's from 25 to 29.
Oh, the 8.5 million is 25 to 29,
The 3.5.
the 3.5? Are there any questions? Yes, please.
I know police, fire, and engineering, and some of the prominent departments that are team are getting grants. Is there any evaluation of what other potential money that we can bring in? And the question there after is there an individual outside of those in police, fire, and engineering to identify those funds or resources?
So we do have a consultant that actively looks for grants. Sue and Barty. We also do have department heads that do the due diligence. I believe one of the chiefs, assistant chiefs, he's actively looking for him. She will maybe Chris Long, and the fire department as well. All of them brings in a tremendous amount of grants for water and sewer projects. So, I believe all the department heads to do due diligence and try to get any grants that are beneficial to the city.
Thank you.
I don't see any, we're looking across, I don't see any from the fire department unless they're just called something else.
What, is there anyone in particular that you're?
I don't see any.
I don't believe they have any grants on the table. I think maybe you're referring to possibly the new ones that may be coming up in the pipeline. There's possibly a staffing one, which would, I believe it is a $3 million total, $2 million would be grant, $1 million would be local share. I believe that would be a 3-year commitment. And I don't know the total amount the city would have to provide each year, but I believe it's around 1 million for 3 years.
The second page, second fire department. Are there any other questions on this? Okay.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So I see under like all the other ones, it tells you the police department. So this under this, oh, I'm sorry, I guess it's on Schenectady. Is it?
First page.
Okay, first page.
For the second page, it's on
So
the second column, fire department.
So under the grants, it says from New York State, and then it says like specifically named Jerry Durrell and specifically Simon Senior. So, and also Woodlawn Preserve. Would those be under something from the city as opposed to, I'm not sure why they broke down specifically by their names of the project as opposed to the grant source or which department it's under?
I would have to look into that. It could just be a nickname that we put in there. But if you want further information regarding the title, and what grant it's associated with. I could definitely pull information for you. Now, just for Jerry Burrell and the.
We have several, so there's the Steinman Senior Vets, and then there's Jerry Burrell, and then there's Woodlawn Preserve, and there's another one called, the Greenhouse.
Of course, like if we
And then Animal Shelter, and they're all specifically named of what they're for, but
we
not
could pull the
for.
detailed paperwork and see exactly, what the grant source are coming from, and the exact type. That might be, again, just essentially a nickname, for those two grants or those grants that you, just highlighted.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Are there any recommendation in terms of new proposal or with regards to what the council has on the table or what's this proposal that was submitted to us last week? And I just want to echo something. We did talk about the audit. I know 2024 audit, the sales tax, we exceed our collection by $100 million. And it was one of the reasons why I asked that we look at the sales tax and to kind of allocate that $9 million there. Because the trend currently is that the sales tax is going up and the growth is about over 8% of overall collection. And we're entitled to 100% of that growth. That is the agreement that we signed.
Right.
So those, we should take that very seriously in terms of the numbers, in terms of our estimate as we go forward into getting the final budget, because those numbers are available. It's from the state. It also can be available from the county to look at the trend. That is something that you can look at. So what I'm going to recommend, I don't know, proceed tonight, but I recommend that we look at our proposal that was proposed, voted on, and vetoed against, and then look at what we have in front of us from last week. And we need to combine as much as we can to come up with a proposal because we need to move forward. I'm serious about it that we need to move forward with this. So let's look at the numbers that we have. Can we get something? Let's let's arrive at a draft for all of us to look at. I don't mind put it together, but if information can be shared to me, I can compile a spreadsheet with the new information.
I guess it's just for council in general. Is the council willing to, if there are certain increasing taxes the council is willing to agree on?
Well, that's what I'm trying to combine these numbers together, because some of us are willing to compromise. Some of us are not, and I respect that. Everybody has entitled to their own opinion, and we should respect that as a matter of fact, because everybody has, where they stand. It's a difficult point to say what percentage we have. I think the discussion started around that none of us, the 6 of us, wanted to override the tax cap. But within a day or so, 2 members just walked back that agreement. So, and we're at a point where now we said, okay, let's compromise, let's have meetings, and let's see where we can land in terms of a better number. I don't think any one of us are promising that there will be 0 tax increase or 0 fee. We all know that it's going to be a fee increase. We all know that it's going to be a tax increase. It's going to happen. But where that number lies, I don't know. I think we need to work better in terms of adjusting
revenue line and adjusting costs. I've made it very clear when I had a meeting with the finance team and the mayor. We're living in terms of reality that we cannot get the vote to exceed the tax cap. So we need to do something better in terms of walking back in terms of the numbers and where do we arrive at a number that is more comfortable for members to vote on. The last proposal we have on the table was like, okay, hypothetical number, if we were to cut costs by $2 million, where do we look at it? We looked at non-labor costs and they were like, okay, we're tight on that. So let's look at labor. Because nobody wants to touch labor, everybody's hands off labor. But I think at this point in time, I mentioned the last meeting and with our discussion that everything should be at the table for discussion at this point in time. Because if we are going to achieve a number either below the tax cap or just over the tax cap, we still need to make adjustments. And I think we need to be serious. And I don't feel comfortable with some of the discussion. Not at the table here, but on the administration side. I think we need to be serious and live in reality.
I don't think at this point the council can, with all, actually there's three of us here tonight, can really give you a number and say we're all comfortable here. I think that more, the rest of the members that are able to be here and us to have that open discussion in terms of where people stand. It would not be fair to the others who are absent for us to make those decisions without their input.
And I don't want to be unfair to you to say, well, our proposal, let's take it and run with it again. I mean, that was a proposal we did, we were ready to compromise. And at that point in time, whether it was 1.8, we ended up at 2.6% on the tax gap. Currently, it's the proposal, the budget that was voted by council is at 2.6% with fee increase at $52 per unit. So I would suggest that we just work some numbers and let's get it over. Mr. Williams, I'm calling you for some.
Yeah, no, I agree holistically. I think even in the last email that Ms. Porterfield highlighted, those are additional funds that come back that were previously projected. And I think to Mr. Fugelman's point, I think wanting to validate those numbers for Metroplex. But every time that we've come back to this table, we've been able to identify some monies. And I think to the mayor's point earlier about the amount of monies that are uncomfortable, that are just uncomfortable with the reconciliation process still going on, that is additional preventative tax increases to the city. So to your point, I would also agree with wanting to evaluate every option before moving to the ultimate decision of overriding the tax cap. But essentially, you're correct, Mr. Woodavarian. We don't even have the votes to do that if we wanted to. So I think rather than continuing down that alternate reality that at this current juncture is not possible, what are other mechanisms? And that's evaluating every other instance or every other stone unturned. And staffing will be that next one after the validation from you of Metroplux's money.
Go ahead, please.
Also, I know that the director of development was here a few weeks ago, and she said that there was outstanding outstanding monies that were obligated through ARPA, and she had a couple of them that she was concerned about. So I'd like to know if there's going to be monies that are recovered that were originally allocated for ARPA projects.
My understanding, once it's being allocated, that'll be allocated by the end of, what's the date? I think it was the end of 24, I believe, that'll be allocated. Once it's allocated, it can't be used for another purpose, from my understanding. It can't be utilized, those funds that are allocated for specific projects can't be utilized for expenditure.
I have a different understanding, so, and maybe not for the general fund, but for projects, so, I will check in with the director of development about that to make sure that what we can and cannot do, because we the city as recipient did take the funds So if you could check with her, or I will send the email and include you on it to find out if there are monies that we were going to recapture, and if there is money that we're going to recapture, would we be able to utilize it in another way within the city?
From my understanding, it's actually used for the same purpose.
I was going to check. So
Well, I'm
when-
going to send an email because I have a different understanding.
Yeah. When Ms. Carver was here, she says it is allocated for the project. But if for some reason they cannot execute the project, then it can be used for something similar to that.
Right.
And I know we were back and forth, and then we ended up with this reconciliation with the CDBG fund, and I think that just went off the radar. And we didn't get a follow-up with regards to those two projects.
Mhm.
So can we make note of that and follow up with an email to have some update on those two projects as to where they are and what can be done in terms of spending it
Mhm.
on the same project description, but in-house.
We definitely should follow up.
Yes. So we'll send an email with regards to that just to be on the safe side, so we have information. That's anything else?
I think you've done everything. I sincerely found the audit to be very, very,
Yes.
he provided me a lot of information, especially expanding the context of what services he provides to the city, and looking forward to the deep dive into the areas of CDBG. I'd say it's also good to hear the refreshing remarks about staff members in your department. Not that I doubt their capabilities or capacities, but hearing the confidence that he has in those individuals and knowing that there will be a deeper dive, I can say very openly, provides more reassurance to me. So looking forward to coming into my 5th year in office, having a better understanding of what his report means. And as his remarks, it's a vast knowledge, so I don't think anyone ever knows, but it definitely is year to year, and you feel more confident in the comments you make, also the information that you're receiving.
I'm glad that you mentioned the experience of Liz Nelson. She has a vast knowledge of the finance of the city, and that will complement Derek and the others. So Liz Nelson is an asset to the city, and echoed by our audit. If there's no other business, I will ask we recess the finance committee until next Monday after our regular committee meeting.
So,
This Monday. Do we need to put a timeline on it, or we just recess after the regular finance committee meeting?
It's 3 days, right?
No, we recess, we're not calling a special meeting.
Okay.
We're recess, so we can recess,
And so
every day.
recess after the.
yes, for the next available day, because not a lot of people are available on Fridays. They prefer not to meet on Fridays, so I'm gonna ask we recess next Monday after our regular committee meeting and continue our discussion.
so move.
Second, all in favor? Aye. Thank you. Yeah. Recess. Yeah. Because we have that meeting, I don't want to sit like close to it, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think we, I don't know if you want to stay around, yes.
And the other.
I'm gonna make a copy. That is, somebody's in there.
Done.
Yes.
Josh, can you mute?
Josh, you need to take that.
Mute this, please?
Mute it, don't take it out.
All right, have a seat, someone. I'd like to call to order Schenectady City Council special meeting, to hold an additional interview for the vacant city council seat. The purpose of the reason for the meeting is that there was an administrative oversight that was identified during the review process for the vacant city council position. And as a result, the city council is scheduled to conduct an interview with the affected candidate prior to continuing deliberations and any action on the appointment. I will have to make the observation that Mr. Toro, who was here earlier, has left, and therefore we don't have a quorum, and we cannot officially conduct any business. Therefore, I will have to ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So move.
Second.
All those in favor?
No.
He seconded. It's
Oh, it's just, oh, sorry, yeah, sorry.
all those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
So.